Hello, Max. You're most welcome to Cornucopia Climate Chats, where we talk about all things climate. You're Max Broad. You live in Washington, D.C., and I know you through some good friends of mine, and you're very involved, and you started a group in Washington, D.C. called Voters for Animals. But prior to that, you've been very involved with writing climate policy and with climate action. So maybe you tell us how you got going with all this.
Great to be here with you, Deirdre. Are you known as the Queen of Cornucopia? Does anybody call you that?
I don't, but I'm one of the founders of Cornucopia, which has a huge amount of people in its team over the years. So yes, I'm definitely was one of my bright ideas from having lived in Boston.
It's really sweet to be here with you and be invited onto this podcast. Yeah, as you said, my name is Max Broad. I am the founder of DC Voters for Animals. And as you bring up, my background is in the climate movement. So, I first started getting in touch with the topic of food and climate early on in college when I was paying attention to the carbon footprint of food. And ironically, the first thing I started removing from my diet because of climate considerations, I don't know if anybody else does this, right? But this is something that, I think you can relate to is wanting to have a carbon friendly diet. Is that right?
Carbon friendly diet. I like that very much. Yeah,
Yeah.
a really interesting turn of phrase, which I haven't come across quite before, but a carbon friendly diet. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So, one of the first things I did as I was trying to gain control of my climate footprint was I started cutting out bananas from my diet. Bananas are shipped from all over the world. So few are actually grown in the U.S. and like none that we buy in the store are grown in the U.S. What I later learned, however, was that wasn't the best approach. So this led me into this world of how do I reduce my carbon footprint, being concerned about climate change. I don't just care about personal action, right? I care about systemic action too. We got to do both. And so that's where I'm trying to be conscientious of my diet. And that's when I started cutting out beef and red meat and eventually all animal products altogether, but also advocating for systemic change. So this led me on the path to advocating for a price on carbon in Congress in the United States, as well as eventually starting DC Voters for Animals, thinking of ways that we can get politically active for animal protection, which is a pretty niche field. And, our mission at DC Voters for Animals is to lift up the policies and politicians doing the most for animals in our community in DC.
Very good. And you are from California
Yep.
originally. And
Yep.
that's where you were born and brought up, and you went to college in Santa Barbara. And it was there you started to study undergraduate and postgraduate in environmental science. And then
Right.
you were telling me you moved as an intern to DC, and you didn't expect to like it there as much as you like it. Why do you like it so much in Washington, DC?
I'll tell you some, Deirdre. I am new to the art world. Yeah, I never had any formal training in art, and occasionally I'll see an art exhibit that changes my life.
Yeah.
And one of those was a study of Rene Magritte, who is one of my favorite artists. He's a surrealist. And, he made a decision that he was going to move from Belgium to Paris. He was working in advertising and he wanted to become a real artist, a fine artist. And so he moved to Paris to be amongst his colleagues, his contemporaries, who could push him, who could give him feedback, who could give him ground to stand on. And when I saw that exhibit, that really solidified for me that I want to be in Washington, D.C. I want to be around people who can not only push me, but in D.C., there's so many people who are passionate about making the world a better place. And I find that I'm a more inspired person when I'm around motivated people like that.
That's wonderful. So you found your own tribe in Washington, D.C., people who
That's
really
right.
want to dedicate themselves to making the world a better place. And in terms of climate and animals and policy, you were saying to me at one stage that you see a strong connection between those. Can you speak to us about that?
Animal agriculture is one of the most destructive forces on the planet. The carbon footprint is pretty substantial, anywhere between 15 to 25% of our global carbon footprint comes from animal agriculture. Animals are just so resource intensive. You need a lot of anywhere from 5 to 10 pounds of feed to produce 1 pound of meat. And you have, of course, have all this land being cleared, especially in the Amazon, the lungs of our planet. being just devastated. Estimates up to 80% of the Amazon deforestation and fires come from animal agriculture. And then, of course, land conversion and biodiversity loss. So, animal agriculture is just tremendously bad for the climate, for the environment. The good news about that, it's really cool that we can really grab a hold of our own carbon footprint so much through our climate choices. And it doesn't mean, people necessarily have to give up eating the foods that they love. But if we are intentional to shift towards more plant-rich diets, I like that Project Drawdown calls it plant-rich diets. And I really love that positive framing.
I like that.
Yeah.
Rich diet, eat a plant-rich diet. That's wonderful.
Right. It really fits in with the whole framing of cornucopia, right? We're celebrating the bounty. This isn't about what we're losing. This is about what we're celebrating. We should be celebrating plant-rich diets.
Yes, wonderful. And so you connect animal agriculture to climate. I can see that. And then your speciality has been in working towards writing policy. What do you mean by policy? Let's get down to the very basics.
Yeah, so policy is making legislative change, trying to influence the lawmakers who are elected to govern our society. If you are somebody who even has an inkling of interest in this, this is something I highly encourage everybody to get involved in because it is so overlooked, it is so neglected. And, the term lobbyist oftentimes has a negative connotation. People have associations of the rich and powerful hiring lobbyists to pursue special interests. And that's where we need our people to fight back. Right? We need our people to resist and be part of speaking up in the political process in our democracy for pro-climate and pro-compassionate solutions in our government. When I do policy, I work with just the ordinary people in my community to make sure that their voice is heard. I work on local politics in Washington, D.C., so city level politics, and just elevating those voices to enact policies that make a world of difference for animals and for the climate.
Wonderful. And can you give an example of something like that? Piece of policy, even from the past, to do with climate or to do with animals, that you were particularly proud of and that particularly stays with you?
One that just went into enforcement this year is a simple one that requires all buildings in DC to use bird-safe building materials so that we stop having so many damn bird collisions with the buildings. I mean, it's awful. And all they have to do is use bird-friendly building materials, glass that the birds can see and that's easy for them to navigate around. Starting in 2025, all buildings in DC will have bird-friendly building materials, which is awesome. All new buildings. And then also there's a bill called the Green Food Purchasing Act that harnesses the power of government procurement. So when the government is using public funds to buy food for jails and schools and summer meals and homeless services, that we're using those funds wisely, not just to provide sustenance to people, but to provide healthy food to people and healthy food that benefits the community and the planet. The Green Food Purchasing Act requires that DC reduce the carbon footprint of the food that we buy 25% by the year 2030. So it's a great tool for cutting carbon pollution from our food system locally in DC.
Well done. You were also telling me that you attended some of the COPs. Who were you working for when you did that?
That was back in my term at the National Wildlife Federation. So that's a US-based nonprofit that also has an international arm. And I spent some time when I was working in forestry policy, 3 of the COPs in Poland, in Spain, and in Egypt. COPs were kind of a lifelong dream for me to be at the UN climate conference. And the first one I went to was extremely disheartening. It was devastating to see that there was so much passion, so much interest, yet our world leaders didn't have the tools they needed to make the change that they know is needed. They don't have the political will. And so that's where it really focused me back home and saying, hey, if I'm going to be from a country who's the largest historical contributor of carbon pollution, I need to be speaking up to give my country the room to advocate for real climate solutions and be a leader at those climate conferences.
And going back to, you said that the world leaders didn't have the tools. What do you mean by that? What tools would they have needed? And do they have those tools now?
To answer your question shortly, no.
No.
No, they don't. The United Nations, for anybody who's an organizer, the United Nations is A plus in community organizing, like the best. And it's so cool because they make sure every nation has a seat at the table. They make sure that every nation has their voice considered. And it's really beautiful how great organizing. So when you go to these climate conferences, you get to see roundtables with all the countries that care about the individual issues. You know, COPs are broken up into different tracks, and countries get to decide on which tracks they want to participate. You get to see them weighing in. And yeah, there's power dynamics, and bigger countries get more clout, and a lot of smaller countries form coalitions so that their interests are better represented. But at the end of the day, because the UN is so good at making sure that every voice is accounted for, it makes it so that the lowest common denominator can hold everything back. And oftentimes, that's just a couple countries that maybe are oil rich countries or maybe are really invested in animal agriculture, like the US, and they can hold everything back and they can really hold back progress. So great things are happening at the UN level, but it's nowhere near enough.
Okay, very interesting, Max, about the policy and writing policy. So I have a couple of questions. What connection do you see between animal protection and the climate crisis? We spoke about animal protection before, and that's specifically about being compassionate to animals. And I was saying to you at one stage, is being compassionate and remaining compassionate, do you think, this is a separate question, an act of resistance in some way? Because lots of things are turning off our compassion.
Lots of things are definitely turning off our compassion. I have to remind myself of that. Yeah, just recently, I've been struggling with inward resentment, dwelling resentment. I had a bill that I was working on that was my legislative baby, and it was killed. And I was feeling a lot of resentment towards the legislator who killed the bill.
What was the bill?
The bill was to ban fur sales in DC.
Ban fur sales. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I had a good mentor who pointed out to me a sentiment from Jimmy Carter, who was the US president who recently passed. The
Yes.
sentiment that turning towards those that you feel resentment or pain towards and instead channeling love. And in that regard, I find everybody's got to move at their own pace with that. But I find finding that compassionate for others to be just tremendously inspiring. And it's not just a personal thing. It's not just a feel good thing. It actually opens doors when you can channel love instead. And when you can find that compassion, it opens doors. And at the end of the day, I'm not at this to feel good, right? I'm at this to protect the world and the people from the ravages of climate change, to protect the animals from the ravages of the profit hungry industry. And so I totally agree that finding compassion is an act of resistance.
And what about being positive? Do you think being positive is also an act of resistance? Because so many things are wanting us to just to give up.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think along those lines, caring, right? Caring. And, something I see a lot in the political process is the special interests, the big moneyed interests, especially in the US where there's a lot of money influence in politics. They are really invested in seeing the populace become disenfranchised and feel negatively about the political process. And when people give up, when people feel like politics isn't for them and that voting isn't for them, that's when the special interests get more power, right? When people are less invested, big oil, big coal, they have more power because people don't care as much. So I think really being attentive, pertinence to positivity, feeling positive that we can make change, feeling optimistic
Feeling
is
optimistic
very much.
is very important. And to realize that when one feels like giving up, that's a sort of a form of surrender. Yes, it's very important to remain compassionate and to remain engaged and to remain motivated and positive.
And
Yes.
I would say it's even more than surrender, it's ceding your power to the special interests, right? It's giving your power to that. It's a donation.
It's a donation of your power. Don't give your power away. Yeah,
Don't do it.
very, very good. Okay. So, tell me then, you're a vegan and you like cooking. I'm interested to hear about how you feel about cooking or what you like to cook, or can you recommend any special dishes or that? Because we're all interested
Oh,
in delicious food.
I love to cook. I love to cook. Having grown up in California, I'm really partial to burritos and Mexican food, but also my other favorite cuisine is Indian food. I love the idea of throwing a bunch of great vegetables and plant-based proteins in a pot and making a curry out of it. So, there's a lot of fun to be had. I find there are two types of people in the world. One type who knows what they love and they're going to make it over and over and over again or eat it over and over and over again. And then another type, which is me, which loves experimenting and sometimes has dinner parties where the dish doesn't come out so well because it's your first time making it, but you just have a lust for trying new things. So I'm always experimenting. I'm one of those people who's a flex in terms of I love to eat healthy whole foods. I love to eat plant-based meats as well. This is going to be a hot take. When cultured meat becomes readily available, I will eat that. I cannot wait to eat that.
Yes.
But there are a lot of people who won't eat that, and there's a lot of great healthy food out there too, and that's a big part of my diet.
So you're a big foodie. Yes,
That's right.
a long time ago when I became vegetarian, I realized that in order to be vegetarian, you really needed to cook. Or any young person considering becoming vegetarian at the time, I thought the first thing you do is learn about food and learn to cook and learn to love food and all of that. And the same, of course, with the next step of becoming fully plant-based or flexitarian or that. It's good to be interested in food and interested in cooking. And we're so lucky. It's such a great skill to have. And another question I have, how much has documentaries affected you over the years? Because I think there are many, many documentaries, and maybe we can speak about those for a little bit. Ones you might recommend or ones you were interested in.
Yeah, it was Food Inc. that dove into our food systems that first got me interested in this in the first place. And it was Earth Day 2010 that I cut out meat from my diet. And they say it takes 15 days to break a habit. So I stopped eating meat for 15 days on April 22nd, 2010. And once I did that, I never looked back. It felt so natural to me. It felt so right. And it felt closer to my inner being than when I was eating meat. So that was really fun. Another documentary that's really important is Cowspiracy because it does a great job of linking the connection between food and climate. I have a couple problems with that film. It like way overstates the carbon footprint of food and especially animal agriculture. And that's a big problem in terms of communications is that people get really turned off when they feel that stats are being overstated. And animal agriculture has a tremendous impact on the climate. There's no need to overstate the carbon footprint of animal agriculture to feel the need to tackle that issue head on. And then the other problem is that Cowspiracy created tension with the environmental community and the animal rights community. That film put the environmental community on blast. And a lot of good did come of that. A lot of the big environmental nonprofits started food programs shortly thereafter, but I don't think they deserved the bad look that the film gave them.
But certainly implied that the environmental movements just squashed any talk about criticizing animal agriculture. And I did find that a slight exaggeration, but perhaps there was some truth in it, but I'm not sure all. And is there any books that you've read that you've found really inspiring that we can pass on to our listeners, or any current books?
Yeah, a couple books. So if you're interested in getting more in the political process, speaking up for animals, there's a great book for that called Get Political for Animals by Julie Lewin. That's the book that kind of got me started on this track. And then if you're interested in just the political process in general, Politics is for Power by Eitan Hirsch is a great book about just how movements speak up in the political process and in our democracy and why that's such a valuable tool for creating change.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much. And talking about animals, what's your favorite animal, Max?
I'm going to go aquatic on this one. I'm going to go with the seahorse.
The seahorse. Wow. Tell me
Yeah.
about why the seahorse is your favorite animal.
Well, there's such special fantasy-like creatures, right? There's nothing else like them. And they're also kind of a feministy horse, right? Like they're the ones who carry the eggs. They're the only males in the animal kingdom that I know of that participates in the gestation process. So that's pretty cool.
So you mean that seahorses, the male seahorses, carry the eggs?
That's right. Yeah.
Oh gosh. Okay. One more question about the Humane Society. I was interested in that. You did some work with the Humane Society.
Yeah, they're a great group. Essentially, they advocate for animals on a whole realm of issues. In the animal protection world, there tends to be a spectrum, just like any social movement, and they tend to be one of the more centrist groups, one of the more pragmatic groups, and they work with all different types of animal lovers, whether it's people who are trying to stop puppy mills where dogs are abused for breeding purposes or protecting wildlife and also animals who are farmed for food. They have a great program in the United States where they help individuals who care about animals get involved in the political process. If any of your listeners are in the US looking at the Humane Policy Volunteer Leader Program, HPVL, it's quite a mouthful, but it's a great program for folks who are interested in getting politically active for animals and don't have a community to plug into.
And what would be an example of what it might do with, say, animals in the food system where there's a lot of cruelty?
There's a lot of advocacy happening with Congress, and so on the federal level in the United States, having people reach out to their legislators to promote pro-animal legislation. Or right now, there's a really concerning bill called the Eats Act, and there's a lot of resistance to that because what that would do is it would undermine state and local jurisdictions from passing their own laws that are compassionate towards animals. It would be a federal restriction and preemption of state and local animal protection laws. I highly encourage people who can to get active in speaking up against that. And fortunately, there's a great coalition of Democrats and Republicans working together to resist that.
Yes. And have you done work that is sort of bringing the two sides together during your political life, bringing Democrats and Republicans together, something that's so necessary in as we see when things become too split?
Yeah. It's hard to do. It takes discipline, right? It takes compassion as an act of resistance, as you bring up. And when we talk compassion, talking about compassion for those who are marginalized, but also for those who are outside of your tribe. So for somebody who worked really hard on the 2024 campaign for Kamala Harris, finding people who are outside of my political tribe and finding ways to feel compassion towards them. Not easy to do. Not everybody has the stomach for it. But for those who do, finding bipartisan solutions is really the best for longevity, the best for long-term sustainability of policy, because it happens in the US and it's even more fickle with the parliamentary system. When somebody takes power, they just overturn the laws that were passed in a partisan manner. And so finding that bipartisan collaboration helps with the durability and sustainability of those who you're trying to protect.
So if things are created in a bipartisan way, when the next group comes into power, they won't undo all what was done before if it was partisan. So finding that center ground.
Finding that optimism is really important for being politically engaged. And, one of those things as I bring up is just taking control of your own life and either doing local politics or finding ways to reduce your carbon footprint, whether it's flying less or eating less meat, just being proactive
And
for
being
because the we
those that don't agree with you. I think that's a
yes,
powerful message that's come
very
out
much.
of our talk. It's not just being compassionate to people in your own echo chamber, but people who feel and think differently and see the world to a different perspective.
That's
That's
hard to do too. It's hard to do, but for those who can do it, I encourage it.
Oh, well, it's very important. Yeah, very important. And a last question, we'll finish on this. Are you hopeful for humanity?
Um, I'm scared. We've been scared many times in history, and there's a lot of good in the world. And honestly, our trajectory as a species has been really positive. We're finding ways to eradicate disease, we're finding ways to eradicate hunger. And while there are definitely interests out there, especially capitalistic interests that are being destructive towards planet and to the people and to the animals, there's a lot of goodness out there too. So I try and hold on to that where I can while being honest with myself about the parts that I'm scared about.
Well, thank you, Max. It has been just wonderful to talk to somebody who's so politically active in such a positive way in the United States and in Washington, D.C. today. And you've given me insight. I think of you and all the people that you say that are in Washington, D.C., trying to make the world a better place. And we thank you for it. And perhaps I'll be able to interview you again in a year's time and we'll see how things have progressed. So until then, thank you. Have you anything final that you'd like to say?
No, thanks so much for having me on. It's been a real treat.
Yeah, great. Okay, and we hope to see you in Dublin someday, eating
Sounds good.
nice vegan food.
I'm counting on it.
Thank you very much, Max Broad. Bye.